Hello, in this video we'll study the shape of the graph near 0. So if c is a real zero of f of x and the corresponding factor x minus c occurs exactly m times in the factorization of f of x, then c is a zero of multiplicity m. We call it a zero of multiplicity m. An example would be x plus 1 to the third. So x equal a negative 1 is a zero of multiplicity 3. And the same in here, except the difference between these two is that this is x plus 1 to the third, this is a negative, and then x plus 1 quantity to the third. So both of them has multiplicity 3. So if the coefficient is odd, like in here, odd, it's gonna barely cross the x-axis at that 0 point. But if the multiplicity is even, as in here we have x plus 1 to the fourth, then x equal negative 1 is a 0, so we will barely touch it. It will kind of turn, the graph will kind of turn at this point here and here, which is negative 1 as well, and will barely touch it. So if the multiplicity is odd, it's gonna cross the x-axis, and if a multiplicity is even, it will barely touch it. Let's see an example. So if f of x equal x minus 1 to the third, here we have odd, times x plus 2 squared times x plus 3, which is to the 1. So the question is, let's find the zeros of this polynomial. So if we set the whole function equal to 0, then we have either x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0, or x plus 3 equal to 0. So the zeros will be x equal 1, x equal minus 2, x equal negative 3. And here it says states the multiplicity of each 0. So the first one, the smallest number is negative 3, which is here. I have it graphed, negative 3, just to illustrate. The next one is negative 2, and then I have a 1. So 1 is a 0 with multiplicity of 3, because the power here, exponent, is 3. And also minus 2 is a 0 with multiplicity 2. Then we say that negative 3 is a 0 with multiplicity 1. What does it tell us, this multiplicity? It tells us that because it's here is odd, the 3 is odd number, here we have an even, 2 is even, and then we have an odd number. It tells us that at negative 3, because it's odd, it will cross the x-axis. The graph will cross the x-axis. And at negative 2, because the multiplicity is even, it will go back turns and barely touch this 0, because it's a 0, and go back, and then again here it will cross the x-axis. Here is another way of finding out how to get to this point here at the graph. So I'm gonna make a table with all the zeros like in number line. So minus 3 is first, and then negative 2, and then 1. This goes from negative infinity, just like the graph, to positive infinity. And then we're going to take every factor we have from the function. And then finally, the function itself. So the first one, we have x minus 1 to the third. And then we have x plus 2 quantity square, and then we have x plus 1 plus 3 to 1 power. So x minus 1 is equal to 0 when x is a 0. So this is a 0 for this term. The second term, it is equal to 0 when x equal to the negative 2. And the third term equal to the 0 when x equal negative 3. And now we could just pick any number less than 1 and plug it here. For example, 0 is less than 1. When you plug 0 in here, we get negative 1 to the third, which is a negative number. So any number, any x less than 1, will make this term a negative in this side and a positive in this side. Again, you could plug it in 2. So 2 minus 1 is 1. 1 to the third is a positive. So any number you pick after 1 will make this term a positive. And it's the same here. We could pick, for example, minus 10 because it's less than negative 2. Anything less than negative 2, you plug it in, it's going to be a negative, but then you square it, it will be positive. And you pick any number after the negative 2, you plug it here, and it will be also positive number. So this tells us the sign of this term in these intervals. And the same here, you pick any number less than 3, negative 3, it will be negative, and then the rest will be positive. Now, any number between negative infinity and negative 3, between negative infinity and negative 3, any number here, minus 5 for example, if you plug it here in first term, the second and third, it will be a negative times a positive times a negative. It will give us a positive number. And any number in this interval between negative 3 and negative 2, like negative 2.5 for example here, and you plug it in the first term, will give us a negative, in the second term will give us positive number, and then third term will give us another positive number. So these values, a negative value, positive and a positive, will give us a negative. And the same here, a negative times positive will give us a negative and a positive. And this function is equal to 0 if x is minus 3, if x is minus 2, and if x equal to 1. It's a 0 because they are zeros. So this tells us the shape of this graph. This is the function itself. So this function, as you see, it is a positive. It's on the positive side right here. This is a positive when x between negative infinity to negative 3, and it's also on the positive side between from 1 to infinity. Right here it's positive. It is a negative between negative 3 and negative 2, and also to 1. As we see here, the graph is on the negative side, and it goes all the way down and come back on these intervals in here. So this table kind of give us a good explanation of the whole graph, and when is it positive, when is it above the x-axis, and when it's below the x-axis. And I hope this video is helpful.